Hello everyone, I'm Jerry Pittman. As the slide can show you, I'm Senior Director here at Innovid. For those of you who don't know what Innovid is, we are a global MRC accredited ad server, and that platform helps power personalization and measurement of the converged TV landscape. We can also read together. I'm really thrilled to be joined by Michael Lampert, the global marketing data lead over at Mondelēz. As we mentioned, Oreos, massive brand, Ritz, Chips Ahoy.
This is the one where I don't have to go through the brand list.
Yeah, I looked it up last night. I tried. Yeah, it's a lot. But yeah, thrilled to have you here. Mondelēz massive, hitting 80% of global households, advertising, and being sold in about 160 countries globally. So one, would love to hear about you, your role, Mondelēz, and then we'll get the party started.
Well, first of all, thanks for Snap for having me and Brand Innovators and Innovid for sponsoring this. I won't, like some of the previous speakers, I won't bore you with my background of 25 years at agencies. I joined Mondelēz about 3 years ago in a very nice place called East Hanover, New Jersey. None of you have been there, none of you will ever be there. Yeah, and I was brought in. I actually still can't believe this. Quick tangent. I was up at Syracuse last week teaching a couple of classes, and besides it was amazing. I had no idea. And besides the disturbing part of everybody calling me Mr. Lampert, which I was like, is my father here? A student came up to me at the end and he said, I just wanted to say hello, I'm writing my thesis on zero-party data. And I was like, how is that even possible? A couple of years ago, nobody even knew what we were talking about, and now, business schools are writing theses on it. So, long story short, I was brought in a couple of years ago to help bridge the gap between the acquisition of data and the activation of data, and to explain to the brand teams and to the tech partners how we could actually go about building a complete, privacy-compliant, global first-party data ecosystem. So I started that about 3 years ago. I'm happy to talk about it or share whatever.
Yeah, it's incredible. I have a weird, distinct memory of my freshman year of college. Our president saying, when you graduate, you're going to have a job that doesn't exist yet.
And we don't need to go into the math of the age, because when I graduated college, you probably weren't even born. But that's good. When I graduated college, there was no such thing as Google. Go ahead.
So Mondelēz has a very data consumer first approach to how they approach their advertising. Would love to hear about Mondelēz's advertising philosophy, obviously a number of brands, global brands, and just how you are personally thinking about that, you and your team.
Yeah, so it's not news to anybody in this room. Mondelēz and all its brands grew up in the old school, comms planning, TV first, buy the GRPs you need to get the reach that you need, and the digital guys can get whatever's left. We also have the challenge that because of 90% of our product being sold in brick and mortar stores, we don't get a lot of our own data. We didn't get a lot of our own data until this project started. We have to be very careful, as a lot of brands do, about not pushing the retailers for too much. Because if we ask them for too much and they don't want to give it to us, they're where our products are sold, so we can't upset the apple cart too much. So, we've tried to figure out how can you create an environment where, data gets an equal seat at the table. Just like creative or brand planning or strategy or media, how can you acknowledge that, if you believe that consumers are willing to give you their data in exchange for something valuable, then how do you go about building a system that does exactly that? And that's what we're trying to do for all the brands, is figure out the true link between creative and media and data that's underpinned by technology. We do it for a lot of the global brands. We've been doing it for about 3 years. We think it works. We have data to prove that it works, but it's a very long, painful process a lot of the time to do it.
Yeah, totally can hear you on that. So with the data piece specifically, so what are some of the data inputs going into the analyses? I know you're looking globally, so I'm assuming there's like a by brand, by country, but there are like 20 companies rolled up into one.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of my peers, I'm sure Mondelēz has a good and bad habit of making something complicated even more complicated. So we will go by brand, by campaign, and look at what specific we call data attributes need to be captured in order to deliver against the value exchange that the campaign. Mr. Kaplan, you just appeared. To ensure that what we're capturing ultimately becomes the basis for the value exchange. So, an equity campaign that runs all year is not the same as a brand promotion. It's not the same as a D2C campaign. So we spend painful amounts of hours trying to figure out the link between what we're capturing, what is the journey getting to the place where the capture occurs, and ultimately what is what they get on the back end, and how does that all connect. It's different for every brand, every country, every market, every combination, D2C, equity, promotions. Each conversation has to be had completely differently, and it goes all the way from media to technology to creative to platform decisions to media spend, and it has to be seamless because, like I said, with the responsibility of getting people's data comes the great responsibility of giving them something that they think is valuable. We actually are fortunate that we don't have a difficult time getting people to give us their information for order. The question is, what do you do with it once you get it? And based on what you're asking for, what are you giving them in return? That's the hardest part for us.
Just cookie.
The cookie and the cookie.
Yes. So obviously a lot of money to go around, media spend galore. Just can you talk about your shift over time with every channel that you advertise in? How is things from 3 years ago different from now?
Yeah, I mean, we put a lot out in the press, so I don't feel the obligation to not share as much people. We would say that globally, about between 65 and 70% of brand budgets go to digital. And we believe that about 50% of our digital impressions have some sort of data attached to them. So for us, it's a channel agnostic, multi-channel approach to look at what is the ROI of not just every dollar, but where the next dollar should go. So we have an extremely rigorous ROI model that doesn't put much to chance. We feel that we know exactly what the ROI will be, by channel, by partner, by tactic, by use case, such that the risk is completely minimized. And we have a pretty good idea now, after about 5 years, of what we'll get on the back end. Cross-channel, there's not much. We minimize risk.
Does that differ by brand, by geo?
Yeah, it definitely differs by region. I mean, some of the global brands still have a bias to legacy, TV, but we've pretty much busted the TV first model. There will always be TV. I'm sure there'll be a Super Bowl spot for one of our, global jewel brands, but the brands being hostage to the old school way of planning, we don't buy into that anymore. TV has a huge important role for all the brands, but our job is to follow, as a brand, our job is to follow the consumption of the consumer. And if in some brand market combination that is linear first, so be it. But we will go to where the consumers are spending the time without a bias for any channel, and then we'll figure out the mix and the cost to deliver the maximum output. But it isn't the old school way of bottoms up or top down.
Yeah, and one channel that's super popular these days, connected television, something that Innovid really leans in on, it's our stock ticker. Just curious how Mondelēz thinks about connected television by brand, and just your investment strategies in that space in particular.
Well, again, I mean, we follow where the consumers are going. So about 3 years, we decided that we wanted to take a position for certain brands in certain markets to shift dollars away from linear and into CTV. And it's super challenging for an ROI-based company because, I spent a lot of years doing direct response media. And I know from painful years at the agency that things that cost 5 times as much usually don't generate 5 times as much. So if you're going to go into moving from, scatter television into, CPMs at CTV that cost 5, 10, 15 times more, you better quickly find out what the new learning agenda is for something that costs so much, because on the front end of the math, it seemingly wouldn't work. So we spend a lot of time figuring out what are the intrinsic and extrinsic values of something that costs more, because from a straight math point of view, it will never work up front. So we spend a lot of time figuring out incremental metrics, things like incremental household reach, consumption-based metrics, creative-based metrics, because apples to apples, it won't work. Our job is to find a way to use data and use math to make it work.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And one thing I kind of want to transition to is somewhat of a topic that you alluded to a little bit ago, and then Jenny from Colgate also brought it up. It's just the relationship between your company, Mondelēz, and the retail media networks, and just retail in general, like the value exchange that you have with them, and just talk about your relationship with the retail space.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. I spent a ton of time on this, and it's a painful process right now, because in theory, a brand like, all the brands, but a brand like Oreo, globally and in the US, we'd buy all the retail media we could get our hands on. There would be no limit. But the problem is that the retail media business is still native. The business model is still being worked out. Some of the retailers came to us and said with the old TV model, we need a $10 million upfront. We're not in the business of a $10 million upfront for retail media. So we spend a lot of time trying to figure out now how to approach it from all the money, for example, we spend at Walmart. That we can go to Walmart or Target with a proposition that says, we give you $1 for shopper retail programmatic. We want to treat that $1, in an agnostic way. Because right now, the shopper people get the first dollar. If you take money away from shopper, you have issues with, shelf space. So we're trying now to figure out, and we haven't done the best job of it, to be honest, of figuring out how retail media works. And it's still a very low percentage of spend compared to every other channel. But we have a global task force, and we'll figure it out, but it's not easy to crack because the business model is still a bit challenging for us.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're interested in the Walmart consumer versus the Target consumer.
We're interested in all of them.
Yeah.
That's where the products get bought. So.
And then along those lines, just from a performance perspective, how is Mondelēz looking at performance of their media? How are you analyzing? Are you optimizing? How often?
Yeah, I mean it's similar to everybody else here. It's an ROI MMM based model. We do have bridge analytics solutions, but we still are reliant on MMM globally and locally first. It's got some great stuff about it. It's got some bad stuff about it. It's infrequent and expensive and not in real time. So we're always trying to figure out what are the the next innovative measurement solutions. But like most of the other CPGs, we're an MMM, very hard ROI based.
Yeah, and so now I kind of want to shift over to back to the advertising side, specifically creative. Innovid and Mondelēz work together from a dynamic creative perspective, and just curious to hear from your side, just the role of personalized ad experiences and just the importance of that.
Well, like I said, it's hugely important. You can, take a look at, any sort of industry. We started about 5 years ago with a campaign called Personalization at Scale, which morphed into something called Empathy at Scale. We fundamentally believe that, if the cookie went away tomorrow, Mondelēz wouldn't care at all, because we prepared for this inevitability 3 or 4 years ago. And part of that is creative, and part of that is having data-informed impressions. So when I talked before about that 50% of our digital impressions have some sort of zero first or second party data attached to it, that's where we think the combination of data plus media plus creative makes a huge difference. Because we've done the heavy lifting to capture a lot of data, and now all we have to do, and I'm surprised nobody has mentioned AI today, but we actually fundamentally believe that generative AI will be the solution to a lot of the creative problems that brands have, because we will now be able to create a limitless content library that can be executed in real time, maximizing the data that we've got about capturing over time and recently. So we fundamentally believe that, especially for brands Oreo, Sour Patch Kids, Ritz Crackers, Cadbury, brands that are very creative first. We believe that we're in a unique position to use data to activate creative.
Yeah. So, and out of curiosity, just like, does Mondelēz have like a brand that they're more, I guess, test with in terms of like AI or different messaging, or is that how you would like start the process?
I mean, it's probably not as complicated as you might think. I mean, most tests that happen inside of Mondelēz happen in, the top 3 markets, which are the US, the UK, India, Brazil, and China, and the top brands, which are the global jewel brands, Oreo, Cadbury, Toblerone, in the US, things like Ritz, Oreo, Sour Patch Kids. So we don't have a problem finding, the brands to test. We just have to make sure that the problem statement use case for the test makes business sense.
Yeah, and kind of like one of the last topics, and then I have no idea what time it is, so we can see what if and when that we're good there. But piece of advice for marketing the CPG like yourselves, just how are you thinking about it currently? What excites you about 2024?
Here's what I'll say. I mean, I get asked this question all the time, which is, this data thing, how do you do it? How do you get started? It's extremely complicated. It's extremely expensive. It's not fun all the time. But if you go in with the basic premise that you believe that consumers want a relationship with the brand that is increased by knowing more about them, you have to be willing to put in multiple years and multiple millions of dollars times everywhere to create the environment that allows that to happen. It's very painful conversations with CFOs and CMOs. I got beat up terrible by the CFO about a month ago. He was just like, I don't understand why you're asking me for a couple of fucking $1 million to do this. I don't get it. How do I know this is going to be worth it at the end of the day? So we called them a bunch of crazy accountants that worked at Accenture and asked them to help us come up with a monetization model for data. And you just have to be willing to put in the time because it's not linearly easy to understand. Like buying media or doing creative, the payoff for data takes a long time. Its technology is complicated. You need to hire a different type of person. So you just need to understand at the enterprise level that this is hard. And it just gets harder when you talk about things like AI. But you just have to have a stomach for a very long process to get to where you want to go. But it is very possible, and we believe and we know that doing it works. So my advice is, be prepared for a very big challenge, but if you stay focused, it will work, and the brands will see, and the enterprise will see a return.
Do we have time for questions? Any questions? Okay.
You're the moderator, so you call him. Or I'll just call on my friend in the front row.
Friend in the front row.
Thank you, friend. I want to make it one long question. What do you think of TikTok?
Besides the fact that you know my wife works there?
That's correct. How do you evaluate data partners? And if you had to put yourself in a box, are you a media person, marketing person, agency person, or client person?
Well, I've been all.
Yes, you have.
I mean, right now, that's a lot of good questions, Keith. I mean, what do I think about TikTok? I think TikTok is an extraordinarily important platform that has issues. It has issues just like Facebook has issues, and just like Meta has issues, and Twitter has issues. We believe that from an engagement and platform creative point of view, it is now a must-buy. It is one of our few global JVPs. What type of guy am I? I don't know. I think at the end, I'm always a math guy. So I'll always care about what comes out of what you put in. If I had to choose between the client and the agency, I think I've made that choice. I think I probably should have made it 5 years ago. I love the time at the agency, but I think that for now, I'm happy with the brand. What was the third?
Evaluating data partnerships.
Well, that's an interesting one because we're our own data partner. We don't buy data at all. We fundamentally believe that the data that we capture from consumers, from the websites, and from our partners meets all the needs we have. So unless a specific market, for example, India, where you have to buy data, we are out of the data buying business. We just don't see the value for the incremental cost. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going? Kevin, oh, cool. Sorry, I'm not your friend. Kevin Hoffman from LiveRamp. Just a quick one. So when you started versus now, how did you navigate the silos of all of the different customer data sets across the number of brands? And then being, the one overseeing it for all of them, was there a certain universality of that customer data across the brands for them to be able to partner for each
Well, it's a
other?
good question. I mean, the easy answer is that there was no custom, unique data being captured. There were, promotional websites or D2C websites that would capture data. The problem was that we would end up in a situation where, I don't know if you've all heard of a product called Oreo ID. Oreo ID is a place where you can go spend $50 buying 12 Oreos with a brand Innovators logo on the front. Now that's great, but someone who buys that may have absolutely zero affinity to the brand. And they just bought some cookies for their neighbor getting into college. So what we try to figure out is what are the most common use cases for all the brands? What data does that mean we're going to capture? How does that data get stored internally? And we broke it down into storage, segmentation, and activation. And if you just do those three things, store it, chop it up, and then activate it, the data that you capture is actually just decided by the brand and the campaign that are doing it. So if it's a recipes campaign, you would capture a bunch of different data than you would for a e-commerce campaign. If you tell us you like to bake a pie with Oreos, that's a big deal to us. Doesn't sound like it is, but it is. So the foundational capture is there, and then we tailor what we capture based on what we needed to do. I hope that answered your question.
It did. No, thank you.
Way back.
Looks like this guy over here. I don't know. You get to yell, there's no mic.
Hi, Kate Pomeroy. My question is, you alluded to at the beginning about jobs and your stage in life at different points, Google, etc. You mentioned about AI. What jobs do you think are going to be obsolete, and which jobs can you see that will be new or needed?
It's very funny, I just got off a call about that. I mean, we don't see it as obsolete, we just see it as an enhancement of what people currently do. I'm sure there will be jobs that will need to be replaced, but what we see is because we've gone on this journey, and because my boss has prioritized AI so much, our challenge is finding more people who can help us do this. That's our concern, is how AI will change the organizations and the brands. I'm sure there will be, people or processes that will be displaced. Right now, we see the technology as an opportunity to do something different than we used to do in the past and hire a different type of person, because normally we would just hire the same exact person who either resigned or got promoted or quit. Now we have decided that we have a whole different list of jobs that need to be done, and that requires a whole different approach to staffing. So, if anybody knows anybody that wants to work at a CPG brand in New Jersey on AI, send them over.
Hi there, Matthew Camara from PepsiCo. Similar to Mondelēz, we have like a ton of brands, and I work on a portfolio-based team. I was curious because I feel like Mondelēz has a strategy, but how are you looking at a portfolio-based data-driven strategy? I know we focus kind of on occasions. I was curious how Mondelēz.
No, you know this, and thank you. It's a great question. We'll probably wrap it up, so I'll keep it quick. But we actually had this exact same conversation about how do you manage brands that have similarities. So we're having a big conversation internally, and it's, again, not private, but, we had a site called Snapworks, where we fundamentally now all the brands will always have their own sites. We fundamentally believe that you can create an experience around something like Snapworks, where you can have a relationship with the consumer who will literally go from Oreo to Ritz. Yeah. And even for something as tactical as baking, the hypothesis is if you like to bake a pie with Oreos, you probably like to smash up Ritz crackers and make it whatever. We believe that that is ultimately beneficial to the brands, both of them, by finding commonalities between Ritz, Oreo, vice versa, something like Sour Patch Kids, which technically has no connection, as you would know, to Ritz or Oreo, except the fact that if you're baking a pie and you ask the right questions about the type of data you're capturing, kids in the home means Sour Patch Kids. Now all of a sudden, you've captured data that you can activate across 3 brands that have some similarities but also have none. So we believe that the portfolio of brands is hugely valuable to value exchange because we don't have to fish for the relationship that may exist between Ritz and Oreo. We can determine that it exists and do something. So I'm sure you guys have the same issue. You come up and talk next time.
Yeah, I think we're done. Thank you, Michael. Thank you all.